is don't mess with Texas. I received an email from a very good friend of mine who said the following: please thank all the good folks that have come to listen to you today, and please tell them that they will maintain the fire of freedom in the belly of America, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there with them. Glenn. I said, Beck, you ought to come down here and run for office. Some men say the earth is flat, and some men say it is round. But if it really is flat, put a command from the government, make it round. And if it is really round, put a command from the government, flatten it. Those words were used by St. Thomas More in arguing in his own behalf in his trial for treason. The act of treason, the so-called act of treason, for which we know he was beheaded, was his refusal to acknowledge that the king's power was absolute. But Moore was appealing to his jury, not only to their common sense. Of course, a decree from the government couldn't make a round earth flat or a flat earth round, but he was making an argument to the natural law of his jurors, and that is this: that there are certain laws of nature that no government can change, no matter how powerful it may be. Thomas Jefferson recognized this 300 years later when he wrote that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among those is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
But not health care.
When we were colonists and ruled by a king and parliament 3,000 miles away, of course you all were ruled by somebody south of here, but when we in the Northeast were ruled by a parliament 3,000 miles away, one of the ingenious ways that the parliament raised money for the king was to enact the Stamp Act. And the Stamp Act required that every piece of paper in your home, in your possession, every book, every deed, every mortgage, every pamphlet you were going to nail to a tree, every statement from a bank, every piece of paper had to have a stamp on it with the king's image. And then it was bad going to the post office. In those days you had to go to a British, a foreign post office and buy the king's stamp. Question: how did the king know if every piece of paper in your possession had his stamp on it? Answer: the Parliament enacted some abominable piece of legislation called the Writs of Assistance Act, which allowed British soldiers to write their own search warrants. So they would come to your home and knock on your door and hand you a piece of paper that they themselves had written, which authorized they themselves to enter your home and look for the stamps. Of course, while they were there, they would help themselves to all kinds of things, including your home itself. It was the last straw. We fought a revolution.
Come on, man, you got to trade me here.
We won the revolution. We wrote a constitution. Now, when they met in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787,
Yes.
where it was hotter than it is in Galveston, and wetter than it is today in Fort Worth. They had an argument, and the argument was this. Where do our freedoms come from? Jefferson, who wasn't there, but Madison, his friend who was, argued that our freedoms come from our humanity, that God created us in His image and likeness, and as He is perfectly free, we are perfectly free. The big government crowd, yes, there was one even in those days. It was Alexander Hamilton and John Adams said, oh no, freedom comes from the government. What good would freedom be if we didn't have the government? It's the government that lets us speak free, and the government that lets us worship, and the government that lets us protect us. How wrong they were. The natural law teaches, remember Jefferson? By their creator, the rights are inalienable. The natural law teaches, and the Constitution was written in order to preserve that our rights come from our humanity, that the God who made us free. Freedom is the default position. Government is the and so the Constitution enumerated specifically the liberties that are ours by birthright. The right to think as you wish, the right to develop your own personality. I've often said to O'Reilly, you should be grateful for that right. The right to think as you wish, to say as you think, to publish as you say. The right to worship, the right not to worship. The right to associate, the right not to associate. The right to defend yourself. Let me tell you about the Second Amendment. If some politician says to you, the Second Amendment was written to protect the right to hunt, he doesn't know what he's talking about. The Second Amendment was written so that you would have the right to defend yourself from anybody who would take your freedom away, including the government. That right to self-defense is as natural as the fingers on the ends of our hands or the noses in the middle of our faces. There is a truly unique and American right incorporated in the Bill of Rights. And after the right to life, which is obviously the greatest right there is, it is the great right. It is the uniquely American right. It is the right to be left alone. Because the first president of the United States said, government is not truth, government is not logic, it is force. And the second president of the United States said, government gets its power through fear. But Jefferson knew that the individual was greater than the state, and that the states are greater than the federal government. We created, the states created the federal government, and not the other way around. And power given can be taken back. Jefferson feared that in the long run, government would grow and liberty would shrink. He was right. But he also knew fear could be used by all the freedom-loving people in the land. When he said this, when the people fear the government, that's tyranny. But when the government fears the people, that's liberty. God bless America. God bless history.